When it comes to the romantic comedies of the 90s, few films shine as brightly as Pretty Woman. The movie is widely regarded as one of the most iconic and beloved entries in the genre, as it offers a modern twist on the classic Cinderella story. With its captivating story and the stellar performances from Richard Gere and Julia Roberts, the film captured the hearts of viewers around the globe, despite the surprising number of wardrobe malfunctions. That's right, one of the most successful romantic comedies ever made had quite a few mistakes that viewers have spotted, even in some of your favorite scenes. You might have missed them, but we haven't, so let's get right into it. Chapter 2. The plot. Pretty Woman. If you haven't seen Pretty Woman before, there's a lot to unpack. So sit back, because we've got you covered. The movie details a journey of a young call girl, Vivian, after she's hired by a businessman named Edward. Sounds like a rather generic plot point, right? But here's where it gets crazy. Edward simply needs a call girl because he wants a companion for important, high-class social engagements with various business associates. What's even crazier is that Edward has a girlfriend, but because he believes she will complicate matters for him, he decides to ditch her and instead hire Vivian when he meets her on one of her nights out at work. Naturally, he believes she's the perfect solution, and when he presents the arrangement to her, she takes it. Now, the thing is, Vivian is a call girl, and she's not really used to men treating her like she matters, so she's immediately blown away by how gentlemanly her new companion is. Plus, she struggles to understand his rich way of living. Eventually, the duo begins to understand that they come from different worlds, and as they get closer, they realize that there are more benefits intertwined with their relationship than they initially thought. Vivian even helps Edward out with his business meetings, while on the other hand, he broadens her horizons and her mind. In the end, they fall in love despite all odds, leading to one of the most interesting couple dynamics in cinema. The unlikely love story was certainly captivating as Vivian charmed Edward with her pretty looks, which gave the movie its iconic name. But that name, Pretty Woman, was even more unlikely when the movie started shooting, as it was almost called something entirely different. Chapter 3. The title. Different title? With how great this movie turned out to be, you'd think they had everything planned out from A to Z. Well, here's a shocker. Not only did the movie not have a solid ending the moment they began filming, but the original script was actually titled $3,000. Yeah, let's just be thankful they made the switch. The script was written by J.F. Lawton as a dark drama about a Hollywood prostitute who begins a relationship with some hotshot businessman. And it wasn't only the title that had to be switched out, as, unlike in the movie we all saw, the couple's dynamic in the original script was a bit more complex. Plus, the old script tackled rather controversial themes like substance addiction, which the movie was meant to explore bluntly. Thankfully, once Disney got hold of the rights to the film, they got director Gere, a Hollywood comedy powerhouse, to work on the script, and after several rewrites, its tone changed. Still, it wasn't as easy to decide on what they wanted the movie's tone to be like. For instance, the House of Mouse's ex-president Jeffrey Katzenberg stated that he wanted it reworked into a whimsical, more fairy-tale-like story, which eventually happened. It was from this moment that Pretty Woman took on the tale of an escort with a heart of gold and her one-week affair with a corporate raider, which eventually culminated in a genuine romance. Pretty sweet, isn't it? Well, back to the title. The movie was initially supposed to take on the title from the script, alluding to the amount Vivian and Edward agreed on. Later on, the producers and writers sat around and decided that Pretty Woman was a more appropriate title considering it was now a whimsical fairy tale and $3,000 just made it sound like a bank ad or a sci-fi movie about the future. Either way, we're glad the change was made. Chapter 4. Time Mistake. Time mistake, no matter how much we strive to achieve perfection, it's just not attainable. That's why, in any movie you see, there are bound to be mistakes. In fact, some viewers even make it into some fun kind of game where they try to spot the mistakes or errors in a movie. Pretty Woman was no exception, although if you don't have a keen eye, you might not notice this little continuity error. There's a scene in the movie when Vivian is watching I Love Lucy. She gets up, goes over to Edward, and undoes his tie, and then she goes to do something else. But in the next shot we get of Edward, his tie is done. And then we get another cut to Vivian. It cuts back to Edward once more, and his tie is undone again. What is he, the Flash? Viewers have chalked it down to just an unnoticeable little error in continuity, which we honestly do not blame them for. Plus, Errors like this are pretty entertaining to spot, but this next one is sure to blow your mind. Chapter 5. Pancake or Croissant? Croissant or pancake? What's a fairy tale movie without a shape-shifting breakfast? Fans of the movie probably wouldn't have questioned this obvious mistake in the scene where Vivian was eating a croissant if a fairy godmother was waving around a magic wand. But alas, there was none. So when viewers noticed Vivian's croissant turned into a pancake in the next shot, everyone was quick to point fingers at the producers and editors. Didn't they pay attention? Or what? It was really hard to ignore this one, considering it's literally one of the most infamous mistakes in major Hollywood movie history. The scene begins with Vivian having breakfast with Edward, but in the few seconds where there's a cut between the duo, the croissant becomes a small pancake. Naturally, some fans argued that the logic was simple. Vivian placed the croissant down and began chowing down on the pancake. But yeah, that won't slide because, as you can clearly tell, the pancake already has a bite taken out when we get her scene once again. So it's definitely an editing error. In the end, the behind-the-scenes occurrence was pretty clear. Like in most movie scenes, the final sequence was put together after taking a number of shots. So we can pretty much conclude that the continuity checker was probably just asleep or about to finish up the day when he allowed that one to slip by him. So let's just wish him better luck next time. If you think the shape-shifting breakfast was crazy, wait till you hear about Gary Marshall's temporary stint as a masseuse. Chapter 6. Vein. Popped vein, we all get a little nervous when we're about to do something really huge. So we really can't blame Julia for getting so nervous on set that a literal vein popped out on her forehead. This happened during the intimate scene with Edward after she got the jitters so bad the vein on her forehead decided to come into play. Interestingly, her nerves also made her develop a case of hives, so the makeup department ensured they had calamine lotion on set to soothe her skin till filming resumed once again. The runaway vein was so noticeable on her forehead that the director had to stop filming so they could attend to it. The vein was probably just desperate for a movie appearance, but unfortunately for it, Gary Marshall hopped right into bed with Julia and Richard and massaged that vein until it was completely relaxed and they were ready to film once more. Good choice, because as much as we love a good vein, it would have looked very out of place in a hot romantic scene. Let's just take a moment to applaud the behind-the-scenes efforts that go into giving us a phenomenal work of art. Chapter 7. The Red Jacket. The Red Jacket, it's no surprise that there were very strict costume requirements for this movie, especially with a budget of $14 million. However, when you have to run some last-minute errands, no one is going to be mad if you have to make do with what you can find. That's exactly what happened on the set of the film. The shopping scene is one of the most iconic scenes in the film, and while the red dress takes a cake as the most famous costume, there was one red vintage jacket that the costume department hurriedly had to purchase for only $30 at a street corner store. In case you're still wondering, it's a red jacket Vivian slings over her mini dress and thigh-high boots when looking for business. You wouldn't believe that such a pivotal piece of the movie was actually a last-minute find, purchased from a cinema usher the crew approached on the street. The crew went into a bit of a panic when they realized they didn't have the red jacket the script referred to, but little did they know the star of the show was simply waiting to be carted away from the arms of the cinema usher. In the end, they bought it from the usher, Julia wore it, and the rest is history. Chapter 8. Fire Escape Scene. Fire Escape Scene. Did you know that the movie was originally going to end with Vivian being thrown out of Edward's car after they got into an argument? If you didn't, now you do. But we're glad they switched it up, and instead, we got the final scene on the fire escape. Interestingly, there's also an interesting story behind this one. The scene had to be reshot over and over and required up to 9 takes because every time they tried to shoot that particular scene, something just had to happen. At one point, Richard's suit got dirted up from all the stair climbing he was doing, and at another point, Julia's shoes kept slipping. In another take, opera music came floating into the shot from a neighboring house, and on another occasion, pigeons decided it was time to fly over the apartment. They eventually got the final edit, which was the ending that we saw of Edward climbing up the fire escape, holding roses in hand to woo Vivian, with the sounds of the opera playing in the background. The romantic comedy became a defining film in its genre, but its journey to the screen was far from smooth. And not just with the shooting, it even faced hurdles before filming began. Chapter 9. The Casting Process. Different cast before Julia Roberts and Richard Gere lit up the screen with their unforgettable chemistry. Finding the perfect pair to play Vivian Ward and Edward Lewis was no easy feat. The casting process was long and uncertain, and despite Pretty Woman's fairytale premise, it was far from a guaranteed hit. Yet the film defied expectations, becoming the third highest-grossing movie of 1990, thanks in large part to the magnetic connection between its two leads. But things could have turned out very differently. For Edward's role, director Gary Marshall had an extensive wish list of Hollywood heavyweights: Christopher Reeve, Daniel Day-Lewis, Kevin Kline, Denzel Washington, Albert Brooks, Burt Reynolds, John Travolta, Liam Neeson, Sting, Sam Neill, Charles Grodin, Christopher Lambert, and Michael Douglas were all in the mix. Al Pacino even screen-tested with Roberts but ultimately passed, saying the role just didn't feel right. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. Richard Gere also initially walked away from the part, wary of Edward's cold, manipulative character in early versions of the script. But producer Gary W.